All right. So Pooja Lalit Kumar, our first proposition speaker for 2021. Uh, Pooja is an alumnus of Sushant School of Art and Architecture, an undergraduate alumnus. And she did her master's in acoustics, and she's a gold medalist actually from Jamia, and is now doing her PhD. She's been heading the master's in interior architecture, the MArch in interior architecture now also for I think about a year and a half or two.
Yeah.
And her research interests, as we've already shared with everyone, are in impact assessment, sustainability, community resilience, disaster risk management. And she, of course, comes with a lot of personal and professional experience in the field of interior architecture, and she has a lot of prestigious projects to her name prior to coming into academia. And her topic today, on which she'll be sharing her research, is assessment of urban resilience as an approach towards urban sustainability and a case of Gurgaon. So over to you, Pooja, and I'll just keep my cameras off, and I'll continue to keep trying to log on from my laptop. Okay, Pooja, ready? You're ready to go?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Radha. Thanks a lot for having me here. And I think I take this as an opportunity because I've come to academia because I wanted to research. And it's been like now 3 years that I've been into academia. And yes, I'm doing PhD, but it's a very initial stage of my PhD. And this particular presentation is more of a small work, which has led me to take up PhD. And also I'm looking forward to a lot of contribution from you all. I'll just start the presentation. I hope my screen is visible to all. Okay. So today I'll be talking about assessment of urban resilience as an approach towards urban sustainability. And I'm looking at Gurgaon, which is a part of my bigger exploration under PhD, where I'm exploring and assessing spatial and socio-ecological resilience of urban communities to disaster risks. So the different parameters that I'm looking at and study area being Gurgaon. So I've been doing my surveys and different kinds of literature study. So this particular presentation is a mix of that. So initially I'll introduce you to what resilience is and how did the term come into its being. So the term resilience is basically finds its roots in physics, psychology, and ecology, and has been being widely used under sustainable development and urban disaster reduction. And the term was first used by C.S. Howling in 1973 and in relation to ecological concepts. And it said that after destruction of ecology, due to any reason, it comes back to its original form. So the reason was not specified, it wasn't anything, it could be any form, any reason, and it comes back to the original form. While if we look at the etymological viewpoint, it comes from the Latin word resile, which means to jump back. What are the contemporary definitions of resilience? It says that the amount of disturbance that a system can absorb while still remaining within the same state or domain of attraction, or the degree to which the system is capable of self-organization, and also the degree to which the system can build and increases its capacity. These definitions are still in that form where it was getting developed, and a lot of work was happening with the term resilience. But finally, in 1999, when UNDRR talked about resilience as the ability of a system to resist and recover from damages of disaster in an effective manner. So here, for the first time, we are talking about a system in place and also recovery from disaster. And then they are also talking about in an effective manner. It's not like it comes back in any way, it's in an effective manner. While further exploration, it said the IPCC in 2013 described this as a system and its component parts to anticipate, absorb, accommodate, and recover from the effects of an hazardous event in a timely manner. This is the first time when we are talking about a time frame. It's saying that it comes back in an effective manner, but also in time. So there are different factors now we are coming to. It's about coming back. It's coming back to its form, maybe not that form, but finding a new equilibrium, and also in a timely manner. So while our particular fields of architecture and urban planning, a resilient city where a lot of work is happening, World Bank is investing in resilient cities. So it's defined as a sustainable network of physical systems and human communities capable of surviving and functioning under stress. So here we are also talking about communities. It's not just about the infrastructure that comes back, it's the community also that is capable to survive and is able to come back. So proceeding, these are certain drivers of resilience which we got from the literature that is available. So and the definitions that are there, it talks about economy, governance, society, and environment. They all become the drivers of resilience. So I'm also talking about resilience and Indian cities. Why do our Indian cities need resilience? We know that cities are in independent and complex systems, tremendously vulnerable to fears from both natural risks caused by growing population, urban population, high population density, and terrorism. So we all need our cities to be, and they being our economic hub, we need them to be resilient and being able to combat with all these situations. And in India, particularly, only few studies have been done, and that too also related to socio-economical aspects. There has been no analytical framework so far. And also that whatever the studies are available, not much mention has been paid on multiple stakeholders or participation. Though we do have certain country program documents under UNDP flagship, but not much has been still done. And there are certain programs like 100 resilient cities, but the results are still awaited. Then why particularly Gurgaon? Gurgaon has been always, as we know, has been referred as the icon of India's growth and development at the international platform. You may call it the proximity to the airport, which has resulted it, or proximity to the capital that has resulted in this phenomena of growth that has happened in Gurgaon in the last 1-2 decades. And there has been major land use residential is converted into commercial in the core city, and there has been rapid urban expansion in Gurgaon region. Also, the impact of, I talked about that, the impact of mega city Delhi and the development of physical infrastructure, especially the transport system, has triggered the land use changes also. And the city has grown towards Delhi, Faridabad along the main roads, and the land pattern use of Gurgaon has changed, resulting in a concrete jungle. And I would just take you through little pictures of Gurgaon, what Gurgaon has faced in the last, and what disaster, because when I'm talking about resilience, it's like resilient to the disaster. And the main disaster that what Gurgaon has seen, and which is an urban disaster, is floods. We are all familiar with that. And this picture shows these are taken from Bhuvan, the government site, and we show this shows the expansion that has happened in just 3 years, the urban expansion that has happened in Gurgaon. These are satellite imageries, and these are the few images that we see. These are the fruits of urbanization, and see how small events, small rain, a little bit of rain affects our city, and it just makes our city, brings our city to a standstill. And also under different studies, it says that Gurgaon falls among the top 5 cities in the country that are prone to flooding. So we have to be prepared for more. So a lot of studies have been done. If you look at these pictures, these are pictures of Hero Honda Chowk from 2010 to 2016. Every time it floods without a change. it's been flooding continuously, and their reasons have been identified, the infrastructural reasons have been identified, but these are, for this particular floods, they have to be proactive implementations that needs to happen. But what happens to the community which is residing along this? They need to be resilient to all this. And what is that? How do we make them resilient? So while I'm talking about urban floods right now, I've just diverted my talk towards what disaster and what are the risks that are showing. Even the World Bank report, it's talking about urban floods as a phenomena. And this kind of a flooding is the major, it may not affect deaths, human deaths, but it affects the livelihood and it affects a lot of economy. Okay, proceeding, these are the certain issues that contribute to urban floods. This is a part of a study which I did some time back, and identified what are how have the water channel been disrupted and how this results in flooding. But that has this particular sheet I'm showing why, because this has led me to think about the communities that stay along with that. And there have been certain very interesting facts that have come to pictures about the communities that stay along the river bodies and how they have been encroached and how they struggle to sustain themselves over there. So while I looked at all this, I also started looking at different assessment models that are available while for resiliency in communities. So the table that follows, it's a mix of literature which have been this has been done through different journals taken down and catalogued. So what is it that different models of resilient models, community models that give, and how are they being used? So there are certain models that called coastal community resilience, which might not be used in Gurgaon. There are climate disaster resilient index, and they have been used and the methodology have been used. But what happens is there is BRIC model, there are people's model, there are again CDRI and CDI models that are available, and they have been being used towards assessing the resiliency and of communities. But what happens now, while analyzing these different models through journals, it's realized that literature, whatever it indicates, that the framework is not consistent, and they are either have been applied in a natural resource context or focused on a single factor such as socio-economic vulnerability or structural weakness or physical components. And also there is lack of resilience frameworks for developing nations like us, or local context, as the applicability of the result from developed countries are problematic to instrument technically at a native scale. Each model is developed in theoretical or conceptual isolation from the others. Thus, while there is some overlap in domains and content, differences are also present. For example, the social domain in BRIC and climate DRI, but this is not included in community DRI. And these models, different models that have been studied, can be differentiated with regard to a domain name and how variables are distributed between them. They also mix demographics and structure characterizations with social and psychological characteristics. The diversity evident in the table highlights a need for the development of a common conceptual and theoretical framework for which systematic study can be developed. So this is a part of this is the part I'm focusing on till now. What I've done is the assessing what is available with us, and then as also assessing what can be done further with these models, and how a model can be made for assessing the urban communities present near the vulnerable areas of Gurgaon. And there are certain research gaps also which have been identified under the head of urban resilience, because what has been found is there is a shared or a common definition of concept, and how it can be measured is required to provide the foundation for the development of the concept and to guide research. And resilience can have desirable and undesirable consequences. We are yet to look at the different consequences. And it cannot be viewed as a normative desirable goal, but a descriptor of complex systems of dynamics. The concept has mainly been discussed with respect to climate change adaptation and disaster management perspective, rather than addressing the wider sustainability challenges. Therefore, one needs to address urban resilience beyond climate change, focusing on holistic approach. This is what I am basically looking at. And also integrating adaptation and mitigation responses, actions to climate change in urban level policies requires comprehensive information on vulnerability patterns. Yet a majority of local government decision makers in various cities in developing nations lack spatially explicit information on climate change, vulnerability, and its key drivers. There are few other gaps. There's a clear gap in knowledge and technology, which needs to be accessed. Technology can definitely be used in this particular case. And though we are in the era of big data, we really have sufficient data to assess what we need to assess and to come up with the correct models which can be used further. And also there is a lot of lack of agreement on how resilience concepts translate into measurable framework creates. And I would be needing help. I would be needing the feedback of everyone with respect to what the work has been till now. And there is a lot of lack of vulnerability, resilience framework work at the local level, which I've already told that it needs to be localized, it needs to be specific to it, it needs to be contextual, it needs to be for the community at the location there where they are. Okay, so sorry, I'll now stop presenting, and rather should I do that? Stop presenting and be there to listen to more?
Yeah, sure, but maybe you can keep your presentation sort of ready so that if somebody wants to refer to a slide, it can be there.
Sure. Yes.
Thanks, Pooja. Thank you so much. And yeah, I also neglected to mention that Vibhuti is here. She has logged in. Okay, hello Vibhuti. she's so I'll open it up now to the audience and to all of you. If there are any questions or suggestions for Pooja,
Yeah, hi. Good morning, Pooja.
Good morning, Piyush.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I was just thinking while looking at your presentation also that this flooding, I mean, again, I tend to go to the history, and is that when it started, like what we did that all these things happened, and I mean, how historically we had managed flooding. Like, for example, in Bhubaneswar, I mean, one example I know is also part of my PhD topic is that they used to construct many water bodies, so there were many water bodies in the city, and it was a place where there was lots of rain, so the water used to go, and those are like a water management system, like there should not be any flooding. And recently I remember some decades back they converted some water bodies to parking lot and all that, then the flooding started. So one example that I could say is that,
Piyush, the same thing is happening over here. We have lost our water bodies. We don't know them. Actually, while I was doing these surveys and when I went to different areas, and the first example I'll give you of the Ghata village. I went there during my survey and I inquired the village people about the lake that was present. And I also inquired the people, the big builders that are around that area. And I asked them, please, what is your take on it? They simply asked them, kahan hai ye lake? Where is it on papers? It was not. It was not there on papers. So they say we only recognize things that are there on paper.
Yes.
So
I
that
think
those are
also
fault.
another thing is that just next to our university campus also, like I have seen some, I'm not a planner, but whatever drawings I've seen, planning drawings. So the Nala, the water body, they call it
Yes.
Nala for some reason, I don't like it. But
Hmm.
the water channel that comes from the Aravali,
Yeah.
all those in documents I see, it's dead end, It's like पानी
It's
कहाँ
dead.
जाता है? खत्म
It's
हो
dead.
जाता है वहीं पर.
So the
So that
first
is a problem.
the first thing is that we know what is there. We show them on the plans. The master plan is not showing our water bodies
It's
at
not,
all.
it's not.
So while the first step, I had discussed this long time back with the different government bodies also. I told them this is important that we know what is there. Until unless we keep it on the plan, nobody will realize. I was stumped. Kehte, madam, you are known because you have an Aadhaar card. Where is the Aadhaar of this water body? The Aadhaar is lost. So we need to get back their base, their roots, their Aadhaar to be present and to be recognized.
I'm sure Aadhaar is a new concept. I think उनका कुछ अलग identity card होते होंगे. We
हाँ,
need to
बिल्कुल
find out
होता
that.
होगा. बिल्कुल होता होगा. We have to get that back.
We have lost that identity system, so I think we need
Yes,
to
yes.
get back there.
Knowing our actually it's Gurgaon, I believe, is a city of migrants. A lot of migrants. So owning up places has gone. What is next to me, I don't know, because I'm new. I know what is present. I don't know what is the past. Who will tell us what is the past? Who will tell us there was a water body over here? So it could be through the plans. Yeah.
Pooja, retracing the blue network is really important,
It is,
as
it is.
important as retracing the green network, which means all the impervious surface that existed.
Yes.
This was all impervious, pervious surfaces that existed. So both the green network and the blue network need to be retraced essentially. And the culprits, put up in "you are wanted" signs. I think activism is the way to go. I feel really strongly about it.
We do,
but
yeah, I do feel strongly. I have been working on this water channels of Gurgaon. I've done a lot of work on that, met people, spread awareness. To a certain level. Then I realized, okay, what happened to the water body which have already been encroached, built upon? How do we cater to that? Now it comes to the communities residing along with that, along that water bodies. How to make them, if it will flood, either we go back in time and undo what we have already done, otherwise it would flood. Now the thing is, we have to stay with what is there and make them resilient now, at least. At least the communities around that area remain resilient. How do these communities survive along the water channels, which keeps on flooding?
So one way would be to be not seduced by, very fancy marbles and granites and stuff. And
absolutely.
I mean, you go to you go beyond Ghata to the extension road, and you see that the more expensive the material, the more the cost of the apartment is being charged.
Yes.
So one thing we as architects, as developers and planners, as landscape architects, really need to understand materiality has a role to play.
Yeah, it is.
I think the natural drainage, the way it was planned earlier, the development and the settlements were done in a way that the natural drainage was always respected.
Yes.
But if you look at the Sukhrali wetland, it's still there, it's all protected around it. If you just type Sukhrali next to the IFCO forest, there is still a bigger chunk of land which was filled, which had water. I remember back in 2003, when we shifted here in Gurgaon, that place had water. But because of the development around it, the natural drainage has stopped, because we have formal roads, we have a stormwater drain, we have everything in place. The water doesn't go into these wetlands.
Yes. The connection is lost.
Exactly.
And if it goes, then from initially the connection was there, but the connection is lost. In fact, if we talk about surface connection, what about the subsurface connection? Because of the massive construction that has happened, even the subsurface connection has been lost. So, so water concentration happens at a particular area. Either it's get concentrated, it's not dispersed. It remains. That's the major cause.
Next door, the AIT chalk, if you are taking that roundabout every day, you will feel, the water gets collected at one place because there's no drain.
There's no drainage, correct.
Golf course road just ends abruptly there, and that's the place where all the water gets collected.
Yeah.
And nobody has thought about it, the whole planning just happened because they were just looking at the road and they forgot that, there are other things that you have to look at.
Yeah.
So I think whenever we cross that roundabout every day, we get to know why is there, this pothole has come up again. Because they realize water has to go.
Yeah. The old saying that water finds its way.
Exactly. So,
but then it comes through the wrong places. Then it doesn't come through the natural ones, and it comes through the wrong places. And we, as we like all things man-made, but nature then ultimately has its way, and then then disasters happen. Because we definitely have to respect. I think Pooja totally agreeable with that one.
Can I go next?
Yeah, Pooja, Parul, please.
Okay. So two things, Pooja. One is that, these kinds of projects that have been undertaken, the Bandh project by IIM Gurgaon and other such initiatives. So what is the kind of positive impact? I mean, are these already models of solutions that they have provided? Or, so are we also trying to go beyond? One is that question. The second is that when you talk about community, and then what is the meaning of community? What is the diversity of community? What is the kinds of community? Because it will be very different, right, from one place to another. So
it will be.
Is there a mapping that you've done already, or are you planning to focus on certain kinds of communities, or take like entire spectrum of all kinds of communities in your research?
See, first of all, I'll answer to the first question that you had asked about certain projects have been taken up, and it's being taken. Certain positivity is visible. It's towards that, but it's not much. It's not much. So there are efforts, but those efforts are presently not enough. And while in my research, if I'm looking at communities, I'm looking at communities which were next to water bodies, the existing water bodies, the channel. So communities were over there, the communities which were village communities, which you would call, and I'm looking at those communities. And I had done a vulnerability assessment some time back. I think 2 years back I had done, but I think that data would not be precise now. I would want to revisit and look at it with a different lens of a different assessment model. So this is what
So then like you mentioned that Gurgaon is a city of migrants. So in that case, then that migrant layer is not what you're going to be looking at in terms of community.
It will be.
Okay.
It will be there, because even if I look at communities next to water bodies, they may not be the original. They may not be the natives. They are not, basically. From the past study that I had done, they were not. So here also, migrants are at different layers of Gurgaon, at different community layers also. So that process will happen soon, I hope.
Pooja, I wanted to ask, you are going to start with the presumption that, I'm assuming this study addresses a larger issue of, urban floods as a risk, as we were discussing earlier. And so we start with the presumption that urbanization has taken place, and it is a given that we will not be it in the process, because as far as we are seeing in our country, it's pretty organic and not monitored, and we will not be it would the issue of existing say blue networks and green networks are not going to be addressed? Or are you going to look at also, because there are growth is happening, and what could be the system by which uh, like in the middle of urbanization, because every city, every town today is literally in this process of this sprawl spreading.
Yeah.
This I call it like the bastard modernization, which has got just no parent. But so do you think we need to kind of bring the, like at that point, figure out something, a system where what needs to be done, now? So do you think, would you be addressing that issue also, or will you not be? I'm just wondering.
No, right now, Aruna, what I'm saying is I had done that water channel thing, and definitely what Parul, I was asking, what Parul was also asking, the Bandh thing, there's certain things which are happening, but I would be focusing at a localized solution. I will be what right now I'm thinking as at a localized area, because larger network is being studied and people are working on it. The work has already started. The implementation needs to happen because the research is done. The solutions are given. There are ways of handling that. So it's time now to implement those actions. But over here, if we look at the local areas and if they become self-sustaining, then the channel will become self-sustaining. So now I'm looking at those. So there it needs action. Here we need research to come to that action.
Okay. So it means next time maybe you can bring that also out.
Yes,
here,
absolutely.
You're looking forward to your
sure.
presentation.
Yeah.
Are there any follow-up questions or questions independently? So Tapasya has typed in, just a moment. So sorry, Ekta first. She's suggesting, she's asking, in fact, whether you've looked at the Ramsar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes,
Ramsar
I have it. I've read that. I've been through that. Yes.
So any sort of findings from that you find relevant to share, or?
Maybe yes. While I was doing the study of floods and the water bodies, I did refer to that document, and I did not got it here. Maybe in the next proposition, and I'll just talk about urban floods, I can get that
back. Yeah. So Tapasya said that she has tried establishing the Aadhaar of some of the water bodies while completing the listing of natural resources of Gurgaon in 2009. And by simply saving Google Earth images of the city for the past 20 years, she could locate jhors.
Yes.
I don't know what are jhors, which were engulfed and filled in during planning actions in the following years. And I was wondering if this would serve as
the Aadhaar.
As an Aadhaar, or
yeah. Yes, Tapasya, I also went back and did this exercise of getting the water bodies, and that's how I got that plan and got things. But by doing this has to come through the authorities. It has to be mentioned in the in the documents when the property is being bought and sold. They recognize that. Right. So this is the process that would lead to the Aadhaar of the water bodies. Yes.
Just to take it back, I was wondering if a planning proposal has been done by the authorities themselves, and they put it on top of an existing depression or a natural collection point, and that what is the document that they would accept as their own fault of overlooking this, because this keeps coming up every time an apartment complex or a road or a hospital gets flooded. I mean, for that matter, this dialogue goes back to 25 years ago, when this the shopping mall was planned in a spot in back in Delhi, Vasant Kunj, which was one of the main feeding points of the recharge, and the DD flats in Vasant Kunj, the tankers would come and recharge the points which were given by filling water which they had extracted from another boring nearby. So I'm just saying that if it is a planning flaw, is it going to be quite a challenge to establish this flaw backwards and of any use at all, is what
I think the planning department needs to talk to each other. What I feel, they need to understand that, yes, what are the different layers and why aren't they considering water bodies as an important fact of as a resource, as a part of their planning, as a part of the network. Why aren't they considering it? And this is a big question to the planners, basically. Why isn't this happening at their level? Because that is what goes beyond or further to the architects. The planners give it to the architects, and then the architects built on it. This has been the scenario all this way. So that document, and also can this be, can the water bodies be treated as heritage? They are there. Can't they be as a natural heritage? So they being mapped, put it in the plan, the master plan, basically. They should be shown in the master plan. They should be there and as an important feature in the master plan. The importance is lost. Only the importance of man-made things is there, but what we had, what was given to us, is missing. I think this is because this is happening. It's a way the nature is giving it back to us. You don't know me, I'm there.
So INTAC has a natural heritage division. I don't know if they have done any studies or anything that might be useful, but you could perhaps look at the work that they have done. Again, I don't know how old or current or viable it is.
There is listing for this area, but I don't think they have done any active projects of reviving, which they had undertaken in other parts of Haryana, but not in Gurgaon that I'm aware of.
Okay.
In fact, Center of Science and CSC has also done research on this, which I had also referred to. And they had also looked at the different water bodies and how the channel was working, and they had given certain solutions also. But the thing is that recognition of the water body, where is the water body in the plan, in the master plan, is important. How do we, with the policies and with the government people out there, at a position of authority, recognize these water bodies and make it a point that they are there in the plan and they are taken care of.
Pooja, aren't we, putting the blame on the authorities and the planning authorities, and therefore not taking our own responsibilities seriously as developers, planners, architects? I mean, I think we have to stop saying ki jab wo karenge tab hum karenge kind of thing. I think each project needs to take the onus upon themselves to be considerate and conscious of the natural layers. So I keep putting it off, saying jab the planning will acknowledge it, we'll acknowledge it.
Morally, what you're saying is correct, absolutely correct. But when a development happens in a city like Gurgaon, we have all seen what happens and what is considered and what is not considered. And I think we have been looking at all this, and we have been telling our students to look at all this, different layers. And when actually things happen, it doesn't happen in that manner. I'm sorry I'm saying that, but yes, it's we only who have done that. I'm saying yes, I'm taking the onus. It's we only who've done that. But what is the now what? Now what?
So would you say it's a case of advocacy that that is the need of the hour? And when you are saying the communities, so when you say the community, you are looking at how the community is going to start taking onus or
Yes, this is one of
taking.
the way.
But
This is one of the way.
so, I mean, it's just a matter, essentially, whatever is the state of affairs, and now a change needs to be brought, and it's like, it's essentially rooted in advocacy. Would be
Could
the
be
way to go.
one of the ways.
Okay. What else are you
One
thinking?
of this.
What else?
I am exploring this further. This is one of the ways. One of the ways is just knowing. One of the ways is advocacy. One of the ways it would be, yes, taking a stand. Yes, it belongs to me. Owning that area. This is one of the ways. But this things have already started. People have started. Like NGOs are working on it. CSE is working on it. What I'm looking at is right now is resilience of the areas which are prone to flooding.
So there's a question from Professor Vasavra, and he's asking whether you've actually studied any best practices in the present context, in the contemporary.
Best practices, I think in that process of doing it. And best practices with respect to flooding or with respect to resilience. Radha, you're on a mute.
Professor Vasavra, would you like to clarify that
No,
with respect to flooding?
think, no, unfortunately, we are just focusing on flooding, which
Yeah,
is one of the reasons.
Yes.
I think you have to look at it holistically. Because flooding is something, which is a kind of byproduct of overall, negligence. So what I mean is best practices in terms of planning. And I really differ, because this is not something which communities can solve. Communities are subjected to this kind of torture by those who are decision makers and authorities. So I think one has to look at this in a holistic manner. One has to question as to when will the planners start looking at contour plans. If you see any plan, any master plan, I mean, mostly they are really done with complete ignorance about the contours of the topography. So when will this happen? And I think we really have to look at the entire environment. And unfortunately, when I'm asking you this question, it is because I have not come across any best practices in present context. And that's what I can give. Yes, historically, there are hundreds of examples which you can see, because these were results of common sense. For example, I know my city, and I can tell you that when in the 19th century they started growing the city beyond the old fort, they first identified which are the natural drains and which are the areas which are higher, where people can settle. Now that was a common sense. Now this is something, which are completely missed in present context. Each city in India is suffering from this. Each city has found the lakes as a kind of free land available if you just reclaim it. It's not on your revenue map, which means it's your entire profit. Each river bank is seen as a free land available, which is not marked on your revenue map as land use. So this is the problem, I mean, look, and we are still going further with this, you see. Look at Bangalore, you see. It has still some of the lakes retained, but look at its condition. City in Ahmedabad itself, for example, Western developed by reclaiming 7 lakes, and large areas of Western city in Ahmedabad remain flooded. It's not only this, but I think we lost huge amount of green space. There is some terrible noise. Somebody's mic is
Just
open.
interesting. Yeah, sorry.
So I think you have to little bit expand on this. You see, I mean, get out of this flooding, which is a kind of after effect of wrong action. But I think start looking at the holistic idea, and if you could at least, search for one good practice in present context, I think that can lead us somewhere, But
Thank you.
to find problems, or to find solutions.
But
Thank you, Professor
don't we
Sawhney. I
have
think
such
that's,
like Netherlands and all?
I'm sorry.
to look at this from a broader city level. When did these
Yes.
policies change, and when did this water body just disappear from maps and urban consciousness and community consciousness rather? When
Yeah.
did we start seeing it as just land instead of a resource, or whatever, empty land instead of a resource? Hi, Tanvi, do you want to say something? A question or something, perhaps?
No, I think I would wait for the discussion to go further.
Yeah. No.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Parul, you have.
Yeah, just wanted to mention that, what about like countries like Netherlands and where, this kind of a water has been a major, not only the canal systems, but also, solutions have been found at the urban level to look at the overall network and deal with water systems, I mean, I'm sure there will be probably examples there.
There have been
May I come in?
other examples. Yeah, yes, sir.
No, Parul, what I'm looking for is an example from within our context. You see, because context is very important. I mean, if you go internationally, you will find n number of best practices, you see, but I think we must talk about our own model, because that is very important. We have nothing to learn from others, in that sense, because I think contextually we are very different.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this feedback. And definitely, yeah, a holistic perspective is required to deal with such a situation. That's for sure. It can't be looked at broken at fragments, and which the fragments is what has led to this situation, basically.
Is there anyone else who has a question or some feedback?
I can come in later.
Yeah.
I have an observation.
Pooja?
Yes, Himanshu.
Just wanted to find out whether in your research, in your study, I mean, and since morning everybody's talking about how planning development has really changed the outlook of a city, and because of that, the problems being faced. So, in that scenario, shouldn't the comparison between the urban design principles, so 10 or 11 urban design principles, and one of the principles is the resilience operations, and second is the resilient design city principle itself, which are 5 to 6 in number, and one of them is the environment. So if we compare these two and figure out, or at least find out, whether the principles are actually proofing our city, proofing in the sense like protecting our city, and if not, then those principles need to be reassessed, relooked at, and have an umbrella view of what needs to be done at city level and what kind of stoppage is required, what kind of plans are required in order to develop. So, did you come across any of that study where the reassessment of the principles itself is standardized? Because Brazilian design uh, principles never existed before,
Yeah.
and over a decade of 3, 4, it started to churn out. So, should that be looked into so that we can come
Should
up
be.
with more and more powerful index or criteria?
Definitely.
We
Definitely.
have assessed more than 15 models, and if you come across any model which actually pinpoints this two things, and then coming out with a toolkit or something which says that this is the method or this is how we can proof our cities in future. So did you come across that, or?
No, not yet, Himanshu, but that's a very good suggestion. Maybe I can look at all this and see if it is there, or and maybe research further on this design principles that you're talking about, that I haven't come across as such in the literature that I've studied till now.
Yeah, so I think if that and and
For
Professor
sure,
Wasabi is very right on that note, where you have to look at things holistically. So
Yes.
it could be one of the ways to see things, and probably this would also help you in changing your title, perhaps. So instead of assessment of urban resilience, we are looking at the principles to come out with framework for urban resilience.
Correct. Maybe I can look at that.
I think on the back of that, Sobhya has also suggested that if you've looked at or suggesting that you look at Delhi government initiatives.
That I've looked at.
You have
studied that.
And Ekta has also, I missed her comment, but she just said that the Chakarpur Bandh is impervious and negates the purpose. So, which I think we've discussed already.
Yeah, discussed that. And Vibhuti also wanted to say something.
Vibhuti wanted to say something.
Thank you, Pooja. I have known briefly your work before, so I'm sorry I stepped in late. It is completely unacceptable behavior, but I was running against time. I did catch most of it. What actually I want to make 2-3 points about the discourse at large. That focusing on the vocabulary in which we describe our built environment, describe our world. There is a sense of loss and lament. There is a sense of failure. And I was looking at the 7 stages of mourning that one goes through when the relationship breaks, and that has its roots in Freudian, thinking. And this breaking of relationship with our environment is writ large in the way we describe it, whether we are trying to do something about it, whether we are addressing it, whether we are mapping it, whether there is this strong sense that there is this break. And we've lost it. We need to repair it. And I'm not entirely clear as to what this break is. I'm not entirely clear as to when this idea of flooding really started. What is the notion of flooding? What is the history of the use of the term flood? Because if one is, very close to the environment, nature, and one knows that the water swells and recedes, because we are not sensing that swelling and receding, that we only notice it when it floods. And this is a way of, this is the way which even, of course there is a strong similarity between how, even Western medicine, not Western, mainstream contemporary medicine treats the human body. And we are treating it in the same way by just focusing on the symptoms, and then not really caring for the process that leads to the symptoms. So there is a disconnect. When the symptom happens, we try and address the symptom. When it goes away, it's done. And then we switch off and then, in a way. So it's pretty alarming, that this disconnect we have, all of us. I mean, I'm not just saying, in the mainstream research, but all of us, the way we describe our environment, there is a strong sense of apathy, and shrouded in a strange coating of empathy. And this, when we empathize, I am really, really suspicious now of that, because in a way that kind of deals with the problem, and then you've empathized and then you've done it. It's like, we must give feedback. So feedback to Dedya, our task is done. So what I'm saying, I mean, I know this is a long rambling observation, but we have to be really careful of the words we use. And actually the words that come out from us, we have to analyze as to where it's coming from. Do we really mean what we're saying? And what is the history of these statements? Even the word resilience, what resilience? Okay, when something floods, and we expect, and then we give awards to people who survived this terrible, trauma of flooding, and we say, gosh, this is so, the city is so resilient because, it survived and it survived. This kind of machoism attached to, we all must be resilient and chin up, nothing's wrong, chop, chop, work as usual. It's very aggressive in its tone. So maybe, we look at, again, City of Migrants, we use it so casually. We used it for the construction workers. If we all think we are migrants, then, then that is what is happening to the city. We don't feel for it, including us who are doing the research. So I think, why are we calling citizens of this country migrants? No matter where they're coming from, citizens of this land, citizens of this country, why on earth anybody, anywhere in this country is called a migrant? I don't understand where this word is coming from, why is it being used, and who gives who the authority to call the other person migrant? In a way, we're all migrant to this earth, right? We all we have borrowed time on this earth. So we're all, at a philosophical level, we're all migrants. But then, I find that again, a way of shifting responsibility. And do we need to do that? Why are we doing it? This is, oh, these migrants they don't sympathize. Oh, Gurgaon is in such a terrible state because everybody's a migrant, they don't feel for the city. Really? I mean, name me one city where people are not migrants. In fact, all urban cultures thrive because people come from other places. They thrive because communities are built not on basis of blood, but on the basis of work. And occupational communities are the most vibrant communities anywhere in the world. That is the backbone of a thriving urban scenario, where you come from so many places, you bring in your diversity, it becomes cosmopolitan, it becomes, and the motor is your occupation, the motor is your work. So, excellent ideas start, thriving and getting encouraged. So that's another word that I would, really reflect on, as I have been, from the moment when the construction workers were called that, it disturbs me. And why are we using? So there is a lot of rhetoric in our vocabulary, which has been actually handed down to us from, scholarship, mainstream scholarship in the world, probably, whether it fits us or not. We have to, why are we using it if it doesn't describe what we are? There's no need. Who's our audience, And also I find that there is a kind of a pseudo Gandhivad in the way we are kind of saying, describing the fact that we use too much material, the fact that we live in apartments with marble floors. Yes, we all do. And yet we talk about it. Aren't we all guilty of it? It in a way, I feel in a way it kind of, at the risk of sounding a bit harsh, it belittles Gandhivad. It's it's not, yes, what are you going to say to the person living in a village whose heart is leaking, wants to have a concrete box? Will you say, no, you better stay in your mud house because, while we stay in this marble covered, apartment, you better stay in mud house because that's good for you, because that's where our real India is. We've got it so skewed, and we're so selfish and self-centered as communities who are closest. We are communities who are closest to the decision-making authorities. And if we begin to talk like this, then we have to. And I think we have to write a new vocabulary. These are observations triggered by not just Pooja, you, but a lot of things that are going around the way we. And somebody was listening to some talk the other day that how we describe our world. What are the words we use in describing our world tells a lot about ourselves. Obviously. So what comes into this description? So. Also, we use the word modernism with a capital M and modernization interchangeably. We need to be clear about whether we're talking about, as Aruna said, I don't think, modernism has given us a lot of stuff. I mean, it has given, because of modernism, huge advances in medicine, also position of women, equity, democratization. So there, technology, connectivity. So all these things, So are we talking about, and then modernization or modernism, which then led to a kind of a guilt pang, which gave rise to postmodernism, and then now metamodernism, which is yet another. So these are, phases of we are going through. Also, in terms of relationship with the environment, I would also like you to see whether you can get some clues from indigenous vocabulary.
Yes.
A relationship is not a band, how we tie. Relationship is a samband. It's a mutual tie. So, how we contain water is not band it, but we have a samband with water. So you're mutually tied with water. So how does that, so some solutions might, in describing our world, you may want to kind of bring in those concepts and see whether that fits in better with the culture we are. I was very kind of dismayed at this recent Supreme Court something or the other that has come in the papers where, the value of the tree is ascertained as 5,000 rupees times. So this is very symptomatic of the values of our society that, we will then, because one tree is equal to 75,000. So if you cut it, you have to either cough it up or pay somebody, so this value, numeric value of money assigned means it is now fine to cut a tree, because now the value is tangible. So then you can do the paperwork and all that, and then you can. So these are a few rambling observations that I thought I might. But the larger point is, thinking of our words, our language, how we describe our world. I hope it is useful.
Yes. Thank you, Vibhuti. Thanks a lot.
Yes, Professor Vasavra, please.
No, I think that was excellent. And I think this is really very important, which I was actually trying to say in terms of context. It's not only the context, but I think it is ourselves, that we have to really immerse as into any subject. That one word, which I thought, which you are using very often, is flooding. In my view, this is not flooding. This is stagnation of water. And you see, rivers flood. Surface water stagnates, when it doesn't have a way. And floods are actually boon to the farmers. In Bihar, if you really see these large rivers and their plains. So flood has a very different meaning for farmers. So I think terminology is very important. And I think what you heard was something, which was extremely, in my sense, it was very spiritual. So I think when we do research, I think we really have to search ourselves and not literature that is coming up. And I think if you can really do that, I think that is a great message which Vibhuti has given. I think this is something, which is not heard very often. So I think this is where I think your task is. And this problem that you have taken, which I think Himanshu was also talking about, the principles,
Yes.
which I think is very important. Because I think we have to really look at our principles, or we have to actually research or rediscover our principles. You see, our principles were there, but they were never written. They were in common sense, you see. So this is something, which I'm very happy to hear, really. I think this is something, which is for everyone who is doing a research. You see, I think this is very important. Vibhuti, thank you for this. It also has enlightened me. Thank you.
Yes. Always count on Vibhuti to raise our level of
Yes.
intellectual debate, awareness, really to some other level. Thank you so much, Vibhuti. That was, not just useful, but moving and,
Yes.
enlightening.
It was.
It was direct from the heart.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is something, which coming from her was like jewels, The other thing, Vibhuti, 75,000 multiplied by the age of the tree.
Right.
So that is, and you see, this is the only language now people
Understand.
know.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, and then you can really equate this to 56,000 trees being cut to join the 4 dhams in Uttarakhand, So you can imagine that should be added to the cost of the project.
Absolutely. It's very sad to see that that our yardstick by which we measure things has boiled down to value of money or economics, or not even economics. It's just money, which
frankly,
is again.
Frankly, we don't even now recognize the value of money the way we spend, because no one knows where it comes from,
So it's a very abstract number, and which in a way frees the guilt, and frees you, and now you can chop any tree because it has a value. So anytime you assign something a kind of a direct numeric value means that you just have to deal with that numeric value and nothing else. So and then you can cut it, and you can rationalize as to how you're going to pay, who all are going to earn this money, and where it's going to go. Do you think 75,000 times number of years is going to go to the tree or its children? Where is this money going to go? and who's going to enforce this? I mean, it's really, I mean, it is very sad where, you know, you coming from a land of, you know, such sophisticated philosophy and culture, and to have, you know, to have this, you know, anyway, I'm sounding like a modernist. Okay.
Vibhuti, that's so true. I think we have so much to learn from our, our tribals and our Adivasis, because they are spiritually connected to each part of nature. And we are increasingly considering them illiterate. As a matter of fact, we need to actually go and learn from them. They need to be our gurus.
They're not interested in teaching us. Yeah, I don't think we should give them that task. They have enough to do in their lives. I think we have to sort out ourselves. We have to take responsibility of the mess we have created and sort it out. You know, doors are closed. Doors are closed, shut. I mean, the, you know, tree is 75,000. I mean, this is really ridiculous. This is mainstream thinking. This is, you know, really, and it's just going to, I don't know. I think we still have so much remaining in our country, our land, that it will just, you know, come out as springs of knowledge and wisdom. It will keep surfacing. I do have, you know, immense hope, optimism.
Are there any other questions or comments? Some cameras have come on, so I'm wondering whether people wanted to say something. All right, thank you so much, Pooja, and
Thank you.
yeah, and thank you for kickstarting 2021 on this great note.
It's been good for me. I've got certain good feedbacks and just in the beginning of the year, so that I can keep on working and continue this research further in the right manner, which is more important.
And of course, that's why this platform is there, so that, you know, the speaker and the researcher is also helped. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
next week, I think that's on the 19th of February, we'll have Ekta, who will be presenting her research. So, and of course, we'll be sending out the invitations and the posters and well in time. But just a heads up on that. Thank you all for joining in. I know some people had to leave because some of our timetables, the classes start at 10. But, you know, thanks for that, everyone. Thank you, everyone. All right.
Thank you very much. It was really a wonderful session. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. So, maybe we can stop recording.